It's a great day, I think, for the city of Detroit. Yeah. Scott Harris in town. This is one of, again, another smart individual, well-polished, well-put-together individual. Chris, we did Twitter Spaces the other night. It's not too often you have a sports town where all the GMs kind of look the part, play the part, sound the part, etc. Kind of walk us through your thoughts on the hire and what it means for the Tigers moving forward.
Well, look, I would be lying to you if I didn't tell you that regardless of who they hired, there was going to be some optimism on my part. You can't go further down. Like, you reach the depth of the well where you can't go any further than Avila. So it's like, I think I referred to him as a traffic cone in my video the other day. So it's like, regardless of who they got, I would have been okay with it. But at the same time, the one thing I didn't want them to do was hire from within. I think it's very obvious that the core has been rotten here for about 7-8 years. And they went out and they got an external hire. They went out and got a guy with a phenomenal resume. And when I heard the news and saw the news, and I put it on video as well, I was extremely happy. You get a guy with a tremendous resume, a guy who was a GM for a team last year in San Francisco that ended up being a 107-win team that so many people, myself included, did not think could even reach those heights. They were the only team since 2013 to knock off the Dodgers in the NL West. They did lose to them in the postseason, but it was still a remarkable accomplishment. But in the days that have followed, my excitement has actually grown, quite frankly, because I think that you have seen Jed Hoyer and you've seen Theo Epstein go on record saying, this guy knows what he's doing. He knows what he's talking about. And I thought his press conference was remarkably impressive, just the way that he laid out his philosophy and talked about how this team's going to win, how he wants them to win. It's been such a miserable year, and it's been such a miserable, forgettable stretch of Detroit Tigers baseball. I as long as the resources are there, I have more confidence today in the future of the Detroit Tigers than I've had probably since, the heart of the Dombrowski era.
Thanks for joining us, Chris. By the way, it's always good to see you. I hope you're doing well.
Yeah, of course.
I want to ask you about, if you're Scott Harris, like in this situation, how do you approach Miguel Cabrera? How do you? Because a lot of it depends on how Miggy feels, of course. But if you're Scott,
right,
how do you handle that situation?
It's a very delicate thing because baseball is a business, right? I mean, you want to put your best nine out there. At the same time, there is an attachment to Miguel Cabrera that exists in Detroit, and the last thing you want to do is isolate that relationship. I've said before, I believe that if this team wants to be competitive, and by competitive I mean it was 75 plus wins next season.
Right.
I think that you have to get rid of the idea that Miguel Cabrera is an everyday player anymore. And I love Miggy, but like I brought up just a minute, like, it is a business. This is a guy with 500 home runs. It's a guy with 3,000 hits, but I think that even AJ a few weeks ago, let it be known that this is a guy whose health is, Father Time is undefeated. And regardless of what he's done here, and you don't cut him, right? You don't force him into retirement. But I do think that if you're looking at next year's starting nine, he may be better suited being a pinch hitter bench player, because the DH position, when you look around the league, especially now that it's been added in the National League, that's where you have Pete Alonso. That's where you have JD Martinez. And as much as the city loves Miguel Cabrera and as much as the fan base loves Miguel Cabrera, you can't claim to be a competitive team and have a guy as your DH who's putting up a 600-something OPS, regardless of what he's done for you. So I think that that evaluation will be made. He talked about it yesterday. He said, I haven't met Miggy yet. I haven't talked to Miggy, and when I do, I'm going to ask him how he feels, and we're going to try to work something out. But that will be a delicate situation, because the last thing you want to do is isolate the people who are so attached to him, but you have to put out a quality product.
Chris, I got to say, earlier you mentioned that whoever the hire was, there would have been optimism, because you're going
right,
from Al Avila to anybody at this point. But we talk timeline a lot, and how long it should take or will take. You go around the league, it's typically 2 years if you're really good at not only scouting and bringing up talent, but you also have a budget to work with. But it seems like three is kind of the average number where if you know what you're doing, you can turn it around. Is it 3 years here in Detroit, or do we look at this team and say, all right, well, we got to figure out the bias situation, whether or not we're going to move him to a different position and bring in a legitimate power-hitting shortstop? What do we think of the talent? We have Torkelson, you have Riley Green, you have a lot of good arms that you could probably leverage in a trade in the offseason. What does this timeline look like with Scott Harris, without being too blunt and saying, all right, the clock's ticking, time to start winning.
Right.
Because I think we're all going to give him the appropriate amount of time he needs. But realistically, with what you have, how long should Tigers fans expect this rebuild to take?
Well, I think he did a tremendous job in his press conference yesterday, not guaranteeing a timeline, not saying we're going to win X amount of games in this year. Because he did bring up something that is true. There are so many variables in the sport of baseball. Last year's Braves had an entire team that was injured. They win the World Series. They come back this year. They are better than they were a year ago. Who knows how it's going to finish? There's so many different weird things that can happen. You can, on paper, have the perfect roster, but if that roster gets injured, if that roster underperforms, you can look back at the season as a disappointment. This year has been miserable. I've talked about it in every one of my videos, how tough it's been. And at the same time, while it's a results-oriented business, and Avila and Illich deserve the criticism that they received by people like us, I believe if you play this season out 100 times, this was the worst-case scenario. And the reason I bring that up is because I think that does inspire a little bit of hope that with a good president of baseball operations and Scott Harris, this thing can, I'm not saying it will, it can be turned around quicker than people think. This team lost so many pitchers to injury. So the roundabout answer that I'm trying to give you is I believe that by 2024, I'm not saying you should be making the playoffs, even with the expanded postseason, but I think within 2 years, in the summer, July, August, meaningful baseball, like 3 games back of the wild card, 4 games back of the last wild card. I think that's a reasonable expectation because you look at what next year may hold. We're not going to see a repeat of the Erod situation. Spencer Turnbull will be coming off of Tommy John surgery, and I still think he'll be quite good. Skubal will be back from injury. Hopefully Brisky will be back from injury. And beyond that, you have a president of baseball ops who will hopefully make some moves to bolster the lineup. The big thing he said yesterday that I guess I hadn't really thought about in the past is you win baseball games by dominating the strike zone. You win baseball games by having pitchers who are throwing strikes and having hitters that are swinging at strikes. And that was, I think, inadvertently like a thinly veiled kind of knock on what this offense has been. I think that they're going to make a real attempt during this offseason to make sure that they are getting hitters, and it's going to take time, of course. It's not going to happen overnight, to get hitters that are not chasing pitches, that are not swinging at balls in the dirt, that are working up pitch counts. And if that happens, I think this thing could end up being turned around a little bit quicker than some people think.
For me personally, I think signs of good leadership traits are when you admit you don't know everything. And as much as you want to say about Sheila Ford, going out, reaching out to Chris Spielman, reaching out to Barry Sanders, getting a guy like Brad Holmes. For Chris Illich, going out, and it's crazy because at the press conference you heard him say Steve Yzerman helped out, things like that. What are your thoughts on Chris Illich? Because I know he got a lot of flack for the whole thing and how he handled Al Avila this season. What do you think of Chris Illich and again going out and getting a hot commodity like a Scott Harris, who during the season, by the way, who's going to be looked at in the offseason? Just give your thoughts on Chris Illich and just during this hiring process.
Look, the optimism is high today. So the vibes are up substantially more than they have been in a while. But what I liked about that, and I give Chris Illich credit for the hire. It makes sense on paper. But what I took out of that was him kind of admitting, I'm not really sure what I'm doing here. To me though, I'm slightly joking, but to me that's fine. That's good,
right? Because
it means that you are saying, okay, I'm not the smartest guy in the room. Let me talk to someone that is. And you have a resource there. I know it's a different sport, and the way that you build a hockey team is substantially different than how you're going to build a baseball team. I understand that, but when you have that resource, why not go to the best GM in hockey and say, what are the intangibles that go into making a good leader, that go into player development? I view that as a smart move. I think that when you're talking about hiring somebody who's going to lead your baseball team into the future, that needs to be a collaborative effort. Even if Chris Illich was viewed as one of the best owners in sports, even if he was Steve Cohen, who's killing it with the Mets right now, you need to have that awareness, I feel like, to be able to make this a collaborative effort and make sure that other voices are giving their opinions about this hire. So when I heard that, it was a weird thing. I almost did a double take where he brought up Yzerman's name, but it makes sense. He has the highest approval rating and the best track record of any GM or president in the city right now. Why not use him as a resource? So I actually ended up being quite happy with that.
Chris, I gotta say, it's a good time to be a Tigers fan, and this was a comment made on the Twitter Spaces. It's just good. It's nice to have for any city when your baseball team is good.